lighting in Los Angeles here today with another wonderful Tech Talks webinar. I'm joined by my colleague Kat Covell.
Hey, Will Murphy.
So I hope you enjoyed Tuesday's webinar. And now today's webinar kickoff topic will be effects. If there's time at the end for questions, you're welcome to post your questions about effects or anything else related to the Grand MA2 software. So we're going to dive right in. Remember, you can post questions along the way, and we'll get to those at the end. And thank you for submitting your pre-questions. We will get to some of those as well. So, what are these things called effects? Well, the effects engine in the Grand MA2 is an attribute-based effects engine. So that means the actual attribute is running the effect, like a sine wave or a cosine wave or ramp up or ramp down or a triangle, and it means the actual effect is running on the attribute itself. So an attribute is dimmer, an attribute is tilt, an attribute is pan. So if you have a sine wave on there, I go to the effect layer, I can choose sine wave, and you can see the light is coming on and going off, and then there's a speed associated with it. This is a little bit complicated if you try to use the effects layer down on your attributes, because you're really honing in on a very specific attribute. That could be useful for media server programming or very specific effects, or maybe just an effect on one fixture or just one channel of a fixture. When you're dealing with a lot of fixtures, I have a tendency to prefer to use the effects pool. And if you're using the Learning the Ropes show, or if you have an empty effects button, you can edit this and put this on the big screen. You can load predefined, and you have all these predefined effects that you can choose from. In the Learning the Ropes show, we have a bunch of template effects that are already ready to go for you. So, for instance, I would select my 12 alpha spots, which are upstage, and I maybe want them to do a dimmer sine wave. I can off that effect by saying off this, and now it's no longer in the programmer. And maybe I could do a move circle. Remember to bring these to full, and I'll see them moving. Now, because I'm running 3D on the same computer, I don't have a lot of frame rate performance right now, so I'm going to turn down some of these render settings in MA3D to kind of increase my frame rate a little bit. See if I can smooth things out. When you turn off, for example, shadowing and just do a simple beam type, a simple spot type, you'll see I'm up to like 16 frames per second. Obviously it doesn't look nice, but we're just dealing with effects. So this is okay. So these are template effects. What that means is that you can select any fixtures in your rig. So now I could do my alpha washes this time and do a dimmer sine wave on those. And maybe I could do a move circle on those as well. So these are template effects. It means that if the effect move circle, which was built for pan tilt, if the fixtures you have selected have pan tilt attributes, the template effects will work for them. But the cues will not reference template effects. These are just kind of shortcuts to get to the effect in your programmer. The next thing we'll look at here is how are we building an effect from scratch. We have all these effect parameters. For example, you have form, obviously, of speed, you have high-low values. So I'm going to base this off of building an effect. So I selected my alpha spots first. I edit this particular effect, and I could load predefined. That would be faster, but I'm going to do this totally from scratch. So I'm going to say add on the bottom left, and that's where I'm going to choose an attribute. This case, I want to do the dim attribute. If you didn't notice the organization here, the left-hand side is the preset type button that you normally see across your encoder bar. Then you have your features, and then you have the actual attributes themselves, such as blue, or if I want all mixed color, everything related to color added to my effect. But in this case, I'm just doing dimmer. You notice there's a quantity of 12, which means that this is a selective effect. It means this effect only works with the fixtures that are associated with this quantity, which is based on my current selection. And the attribute is dim. My mode is absolute. It says absolutely go from this low value to this high value. My form is a sine wave. I have other forms I could choose from. Like I said, that triangle ramp or ramp plus, ramp negative. We're just going to do a sine wave. My speed, how quick do I want my effect to run? I'm going to do 10 BPMs. Rate and speed are linked together. So the rate becomes a multiplier of the speed, which is the base speed of effects is 60 BPMs. Therefore, if I did rate 0.5, you'd notice my speed was 30. If I did rate 2, my speed would be 120 because effects are based off of 60 BPMs. Rate will become more usable if you're using speed groups. If you guys didn't watch the webinar on speed masters and group masters, etc., I'd encourage you to go to our YouTube Tech Talks channel, and you'll see a whole webinar about speed masters, rate masters, group masters, and other things. You can choose a direction for your effect. We're just doing forward and the low and high values. So I know that a dimmer is capable of 0 to 100. So if I want the highest intensity to be 75, my high value is 75. Remember, we've chosen absolute, which is absolutely go from 0 to 75 regardless of what a Q might be telling it to do at a different value. At this point, I want to start this effect so we can see it. Now, I basically see a sine wave. You see some of these lights are all the way up at 75, some of them are at 0, spread out across this sine wave. And an easier way to display this is this particular line. I'm going to say edit the effect line on the top right, and I see this sine wave. So next I want to talk about phase. So this is just a user interface. It's the same way to set the form, same way to set low, high values, same way to set speed. Now I want to talk about phase. Phase is the distribution of these fixtures across this sine wave. A form is always 360 degrees no matter what. And this dictates how these lights are distributed. So since it's 0 to 360, I have 12 lights evenly distributed across this form, which is why some of these lights are on and some of these are at 0. If I change this phase to 0, they are, and I reassert this effect, all the lights come up and all the lights go down because they're one big clump going up this form and then coming down this form based on the phase 0 to 0. I could say phase 90 and we'll reassert that, and you see some of them are all on because they're kind of clumped together. 90 degrees of this form is just this little hump and then the lower hump. And if we go back to 360, you'll find they're evenly distributed. Some people are probably noticing these changes are not updating live because of a bug in the software in version 3.1. That's planned to be fixed with the next release of 3.2. So now phase, what happens if I go above 360? I'm going to go to 720. So that's basically two forms, right? If I assert this, the form is always 360 degrees. So what happens to the fixtures? They essentially wrap around on that form again. So now my 12 lights, it looks like I'm running two sine waves through them. And your phasing can go up to, we could do a third one, we could do like 360 times 3. And now you have 1080, which means you're going to get what looks like 3 waveforms. So that's what phasing is. Remember, your form is always 360 degrees. The phase from and to dictates the spread of those fixtures across that particular form. Now, width dictates the width of this form. What does it look like? When I bring it to half, it's still 360 degrees, but half of those fixtures are running through a sine wave, and the other half are just sitting at 50%. This doesn't really the width doesn't really make sense with a sine wave. It would make sense though with PWM, not random, PWM. And when you do a PWM, half of these lights are on, half of these are off. So if you bring this width down to say like 19, 16, you see that there's only 2 of them on because the phase is 0 to 360. Out of all the 12 lights, they're distributed evenly across this form. Only a couple of them hit this rise, and the rest are sitting at the low point. The usefulness of this, would be like if I do a little math, if I want 1 on at a time, I'd say 1 divided by 12 times 100, and then I get 8.3. And what this means, hey, there's only 1 light on at a time. And now I have an effect that basically chases 1 light at a time from stage left to stage right. I can change this direction. There's a direction button down here, direction backwards, which means it's going to run the other way. And maybe I want to speed this up so it goes faster. And I assert that again, and it goes across. Now in the questions, somebody asked about one-shot effects. So currently this effect runs over and over, but we have this new option over here all the way on the right called single shot. When I turn this on, it means that the effect only runs 1 time. So every time I hit this effect, it's going to run 1 time. And this would make more sense on maybe a flash button. So this effect is running in my programmer. I will store this to this executor, and when I hit go,
you have to off the effect first.
Fade times 0. So every time I hit go, this effect runs 1 time through. And that's the concept of the single shot, instead of it running continuously. If I actually change this back to turn off the single shot, I hit go, this is just going to continuously run instead of a single shot. So that's where width with PWM can tie into things. We'll start this effect again. I'm going to go back to make this a sine wave and set our width back to 100. And we'll assert that effect. It's kind of fast. So notice you can also use your encoders to make these changes. You'll see by me using the encoders, it is actually updating live. So that's a good little workaround in your environment. So we talked about phase, which was 0 to 360. That dictates how the fixtures are spread across this form, and I did 0 to 720 to make it look like 2 waveforms. There's a faster way to do this though, and it's the MA2 feature of effects where you have groups, blocks, and wings. If I change my groups to 6, I get essentially the same look as having 2 sine waves. Whereas if I go groups of 2, you see you essentially get an alternating pattern. So you don't even really need to mess with the phase. The phase of 0 can be 0 to 0 can be repeated by just saying groups of 1. If I say 3, I think I get, is it 3? Yeah, no, 4, sorry. 4 is essentially 3 sine waves. You can also do blocks, which basically blocks the fixtures together, so there's 3 clumped together instead of them being all independent. And then the nice thing is you have wings. So wings of 2 is a mirror function. The first half mirror the second half. If you bring this up to, say, 4, you get the first 3 mirror the second 3, and the second 3 mirror the third 3, and the third 3 mirror the fourth 3. And you can do combinations of these together. So you might have 2 groups and wings of 2. So you get an alternating symmetrical pattern. Definitely something to play around with. We suggest learning effects is not something you learn overnight. You must practice this. You have to play with effects in order to tie them into your way of thinking. So spend hours on this, just the same as what I'm doing here. You have on PC, you have MA3D. Spend a whole day. A month later, spend a whole day again. A month later, spend a whole day again. Keep trying and trying until you figure it out. And that's the best way you're going to learn effects. Nobody can really tell you. We give you the building blocks here. You have to go play in order to really make sense of how effects work. So that's kind of the fundamental of all these settings, the parameters associated with effects. And then we keep building from here. So currently I have a selective effect. That means the queue is actually going to reference it. So remember, this effect I stored on this executor, which was doing that one-time single-shot chase. Well, because it's a selective effect, and now I made all these changes to this object, the same way that I would make changes to a preset, when I hit go, now this queue list looks like this effect that we just changed, which is just a sine wave at 20 BPMs with no groups, blocks, or wings. If I say wings of 2 and groups of 2, and then I hit go, now the effect in this queue looks different. Template effects do not work that way. So if got my alpha spot selected, I have this move circle effect, and if I were to go back to this playback and store that, the good news is when I play that executor, it will look exactly like that, right? But let's see, group 2 and move circle. Let's say I go into this and I change, instead of low high value, I change my readout on the bottom right to center size. I change the size of this circle to be a lot smaller. I've modified the object. But now if I run this same queue list, it doesn't change the effect, because template effects are just shortcuts. They become hard values when you store it to the queue. Okay, so calling a template would be the same as you just dialing in random values in your programmer and then storing them to the queue. There's no reference. Remember, if you want your queues to reference an effect object, make a selective effect object. So that's the basic of single attribute effects. The next thing many people are usually asking about is related to pan tilt effects, which are 2 attributes. I could add pan and tilt. It's very boring to start from that point, so I X out of that. I prefer to use load predefined. In here we find a circle, pan tilt circle, and essentially our effect is ready. Let's see what this looks like from the predefined. It's small. So I'm going to open the editor. If I want the circle to be a little bigger, I increase the size. And remember, we can do this from our encoders. See 81, see how it's changing in the actual effect. It's not very symmetrical, right? So a nice thing you could do is wings of 2. But what a lot of people don't realize with wings of 2, when it comes to pan and tilt, is if I look at these center 2, you'll notice that the tilts are mirroring each other, but the pans are not. The pans are in sync. And that's because you have to reverse the selection order for the phasing. Well, rather than having to screw around with the phase, we put in this nice little shortcut. So just on your pan line, you're going to change wings to -2. And now you'll see these center 2 lights, the pans are mirroring, and the tilts are still mirroring because the tilts are at 2. And now you have a nice symmetrical effect. The other important thing, with wouldn't apply here. Phases 0 to 360, which is why my groups, belongs, and wings work nicely. My sizing is the size of my circle. One thing that's important is I want to be able to point these lights wherever I want and have them do a circle, which is why this is relative. Okay? If I made this absolute, the circle would always exist in one corner of the stage and I'd never be able to point these lights anywhere else. But because it's a relative effect, it says, please, the center point is where I point them and do a size of 88 around that center point. So if I look at my stage view, I can now point these lights over here and do a circle. Now what I'm noticing is kind of big, so I'm going to bring this down. And maybe 2? No, there we go. Make it a little easier to see. So now the circle is happening on downstage right. In the same stage view, I could point these downstage left and they're still doing their circle. I could point them on the singer and they're still doing their circle. I can reference presets as well. Drummer, I get the circle around the drummer, around the singer, around the keyboardist. This is possible because it's a relative effect. It says, please run this effect around the current value that it's pointed at. So it makes a lot of sense with pan tilt because you want to be able to point those anywhere. Maybe with dimmer, you could do a dimmer effect that said that was a low value of -10 and a high value of +10. So then you can have an effect that's going from -10% to +10% based around where it's currently sitting. Could be sitting at 40, could be sitting at 80%, could be sitting at 50. So remember that about relative. The other multi-form effect that many people want to work with is, RGB or CMY. Once again, yeah, I could come in here and add these one by one. It'd be very boring. Instead, I like to use load predefined. We'll start with RGB rainbow. And when I run that effect, I get a nice RGB rainbow. The reason I get that is because I have 3 different phase forms. So if I wanted to just do a 2-color effect, I would change that to a single kind of sine wave and change my readout to low value, high value. And instead of 0 to 100, which right now is going to be just black and white because all the color flags close and then they open back up, I want my low value to reference my presets in my show. So I could say my low value is red and my high value is lavender. I reassert this effect. And now I have a nice 2-color effect that's running. If I'd like to mirror this, I change my wings to 2. If I don't want that crossfade in the middle, remember a sine wave is a very nice fade. Maybe I do something like a ramp. Sorry, not a ramp. I do something like a PWM. So it's a very sharp cut between the 2 colors, and then you see how they're basically snap, snap, snap. Now maybe you don't want to be so hard on your color flags. So a nice thing with PWM is you can add a little bit of attack. So there's a little bit of a rise to this. Maybe 10, and the decay would be 15. So instead of a sharp square edge, there's a little bit of a fade out so that your color flags aren't snapping. Obviously with LEDs, this doesn't matter. You can do the hard edge, but maybe with the color flags, you want to have a little ramp so they're not totally snapping, and then your lighting techs have to go fix them. Somebody did ask about the multi-form effects. You'll notice here that with pan and tilt, this circle is actually form 19, but it's a multi-form, dot 1 and dot 2. So if we look at this, this is the circle form, dot 19. I'm going to copy this form here so we can look at it. And right now I'm looking at this in 2D mode, so I see a circle. If I change this to non-2D mode, you can see circle 1 is, let's see, form 1 is a sine wave. Form 2 is a cosine. That's how you create circles. If we do the RGB effect, I remember when I first loaded this, RGB rainbow, it's phase 1, 2, and 3. That's because if the phase is matched for the color flags, it just goes white-black because all the color flags close and then they open back up again. But here we've already implemented phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Technically, you could build this, I think. Can we do this? Yes. So phase 1, and then I would add a graph, and then I would do phase 2, and then I would add a graph, and I would do phase 3. So now you have the 3 phases in there, cyan, magenta, and white or yellow. And this particular thing, instead of having to reference 3 different forms, could just reference that one form that we just created and do the same thing. It's the 3 different phases for the rainbow effect. This particular rainbow effect, it's a, yep.
Hey, Will.
Yeah.
I have a good question that kind of sort of ties in with this whole color demonstration you're going on here. We do have an EOS programmer that's asking about the way that it's programmed in the EOS, where you would have to have an effect reference for color presets and have that fade across a range of fixtures. I guess it's good to explain what the differences are here.
Yeah, our Gremma 2 effects engine is a attribute form-based effects engine. It means that you really only can go between 2 colors in regards to the effects engine. But remember, we have chasers. So chasers are a variation on effects. That's not the thing I wanted to do. So if you have to do a 3 or a 4 color, you're trying to do a step-based effects engine, which is more ETC style. Step-based effects are just cue lists. People have a tendency to think that step-based effects engine are something magical. They're just cue lists with timing. So for us, we just use a chaser, and you store a cue with color 1, and you store a cue with color 2, and you store a cue with color 3. I know that we don't have some of the shortcuts related to the width of the color. That's where a step-based effects engine does become a little bit more advantageous. But just so you're aware of how you might build, we want to do group 2, color 1 is Congo. Color 2 is cyan. Color 3 is red. Color 4 is green. And then I would change this in the assign window. You'd make this a chaser. And if you wanted to do something a little bit more advanced than just snapping, you would have to start using individual timing. So I'd say color 1, and we'd say, go to delay, say 0 through 2, and we'd store that as Q1, and then we'd say cyan, 0 through 2, and we store that as our second cue, and then we'd have our red delay 0 through 2, store that, and then our green with a delay of 0 through 2, and store that. So now I'd want to let me set my fade time to 0. Now you see it just chases across, and your fade time ends up dictating, and you see the faster that I trigger these, the shorter the width is. So if I make this a, say, width of 2, I'll turn this into a rate fader. I'm going to set my trigger time of, say, 2 seconds. When I hit go, because my delay was 0 through 2, you'll see that this changes, you know, one color at a time. If I try to increase this rate, which that's not going to work, I don't have enough space on my screen. There we go. Now this should be nicer. So as I increase the rate, it's changing the fade time. Is this right? The rate? Yeah, I think so. Yes. This would be, you'd adjust these at, say, 1.5, and you'd essentially be changing I guess the rate fader doesn't work the way I thought it was going to, but the timing, the trig time here is what you would use to change the width of your colors. So then you're essentially recreating this step-based effects engine. So all the tools are in here. It just might not have the most streamlined form of workflow, but if you notice these encoders, if you think about a step-based effects engine, you're probably spinning an encoder to kind of change the width of a particular color. You could do that there with the encoder, except the only thing is it's not based on tenths. It's doing whole numbers. So that's kind of the difference. You use chasers and sequences for the step-based functionality, and in a standard queue list, you'd trigger it by saying, in this command column, by saying go Executor 1.4, and that starts it. And then if you had a second queue in this queue list, you would off Executor 1.4 fade 5 to fade it out. Turn it off with a fade of 5 seconds. That's kind of the difference there.
Cool. I have at least one more color question here, and that's, is there any way to apply an effects to HSI?
No. Sorry. It's on our wish list, though, so hopefully we find a solution for that. You could do HSI, obviously, if the fixture actually had HSI channels. So if you have a mode you can put your fixture in that has HSI channels, then of course you can run HSI-based effects.
Cool. Sorry to have interrupted your flow there, Will.
All good. So the other bit that most people want to know is how do you put these effects into queues and how do you take them out? So I'd select my fixtures and I'd bring them to full, and working on this executor, I'll store that as the first queue. And then I want to do my, let's re-level this, red lab effect. And we store that there. It's very interesting is to watch the tracking sheet during this process, because you can see no effects, and then the PWM effect gets added. And now we're going to do the go down to that singer, and then we have our circle running, and we store that as the next queue. So if you go to position, you see the circle stuff got added. Now, if you find yourself, say, if we look at our layout view 105 through 108, I don't want those running effects anymore, then I would stomp them. So I select the ones and 108 here. I would stomp them, which that shortcut, by the way, is hold MA, tap your @ key, you see Stomp in the command line, and you'll say please. And now those center 4 fixtures are not running any effects anymore. You've stomped all of them. And maybe they should go to Congo Blue. We'd store this as the next queue, and you see it adds a stomp form on the effect layer for pan, tilt, and color. So the nice thing is with an attribute-based effects engine, you have a lot more versatility in regards of control of your fixtures, because we designed it so it was the same approach as regular values. If you see a light that's on and you want it to turn off, you select it and you turn it off. If you see a light that's running an effect and you want it to not run an effect, you select it and stomp it. So the same idea works here. I've seen situations where maybe you just want to stomp the color. So if I take these outer 4 and I just want to stomp the color, I say MA@, which is stomp, tap on color, and now you'll see the pan tilt is still running, but the color has stopped. And then we store that as the next queue. And you see RGB is stomped, but position, the circle effect is still running. So if we run through this particular queue list, the fade time of effects, by the way, is dictated by this fade column here of your regular queue list. And you'll see in Q4 where we took out the color, we stomped the color of those middle 4, and we hit stomp the pan tilt. And then in Q5, we stomped just the color in those outer fixtures. So that's how you get effects into queues. That's how you get them out. Also, this is a selective effect. If you want this to not be a selective effect anymore, let's say I just made a new one here. Load predefined RGB, not that one. Load predefined RGB rainbow. You'll notice the quantity of 0 means that it's a template effect. So if you want that to not be a template effect, you select the lights that you want it to be selected for. You select all these, you say take selection. If you have nothing selected and you say take selection, these go back to 0. So that's how you alternate between selective and template. Remember though, if you have a selective effect and you've already used it in queues, and then you take selection to 0, those values become hard values in the queue list. I know one of the questions was related to how do I store effect data to my presets. It's very easy. We've been looking at these various layers, right? So let's say I have, if I select these fixtures, we're going to turn off everything. Go to my effects. We'll do a pan tilt circle. Point it on the singer. And I want this to be in a position preset. I just store it there. Just kidding. We have to, this only works with the template effects. That move circle. And now we store this here? Yeah, you see we get a little pink marker and a yellow marker. Just to back up a second, you notice what I did. If I really wanted it to be this pan tilt circle, because this is a selective effect, it can't be stored to another object. But I can use this function called extract, MA@, gives me the extract keyword. I extract the hard values from that preset, from that effect, which is supposed to throw them. Yeah, that's good. I don't know why it's not running, but let's store this to the position pool. And good. Yeah, so now the effect values are there. And the particular question was how do I store a stomp to my position pool? I would just select a fixture, go to the effect layer, go to form, choose stomp. There's a form, pan tilt stomp, and then I would store universal. So it works with any fixture that has pan tilt values. So now I could select anything. I could say hit this preset, and now those fixtures have a stomp form. So if you don't want to use the effects pool, you don't have to. You can use your typical preset pools, and the little pink flag indicates that you've stored effect information here. So now the nice thing about this particular preset is this is my singer circle preset. So now when I grab this, it's always pointed on my singer and doing a circle, as opposed to saying singer and then go to my effect pool. So let's run through some questions, Kat. Let's see how many we can answer in a short amount of time.
There are so many questions. I'm seeing a lot of questions that are asking about very specific effects. I feel like it would be a cool thing if you could just show us how you would approach something very specifically. Like if you need point A to point B to get it done.
Unfortunately, the audio cut out there. Can you tell me again what effect you want me to create?
Create like a raindrop effect.
A raindrop?
Yeah.
You mean like a fly from the
top? Yeah, a little fly out with a little, dimmer, a little dimmer / falling rain type effect.
Yeah, these are always very stupid to try to build. I don't know why. I thought there was one, yeah, dimmer fly out. There we go. There's a predefined called dimmer fly out. This is going the wrong way, obviously. Form 23 is what they're referencing, and we can try to change the direction of this effect and see what happens. Yeah, you want to go the other way around. I always stump myself when I try to build these. That's not what I wanted. Fly out.
But this is a fantastic. This is a fantastic way for you to show that it takes this much to build an effect. You have to play with it. You have to kind of go about it and think about it. It's not an instantaneous thing to happen.
Yeah, this is why I say practice is so important. You have to get this to become second nature. So hopefully you guys noticed what I just did. This fly in is going in the up direction. If I reverse this, ramp form is for tilt. If I reverse this, now they're tilting down. What is had this other form here is the dimmer. So if I bring this here this way, if I bring this square, the dimmer is going to snap on. And you can see it's snapping on there when it's in the outward position, but it's fading out at the very end because I have a fade out. I could square this off and then it snaps off. I could ramp this to have a nice fade in as it's coming down. So all I had to do was open a form pool and reverse the ramp that's associated with the tilt. We then might want to mirror this to make a little bit more of a raindrop type of thing. And now they're mirrored, and I might do groups of 4. Now this is happening in order. I realized I didn't point out selection order always matters. So this quantity is taking these fixtures in order. I could do shuffle selection, and now this effect is essentially randomized, per se. And we'll speed that up. And is that like the rainbow effect you were looking for?
Yeah, it got your point across that it takes a little effort to build something that you're looking to build.
And you'll notice I sped up this effect, and we're kind of noticing the dimmers coming on before those are tilting all the way up. this is where you come into your form and you move this, you move the point associated with the dimmer. Give it a little more time to reset before it turns on. Sorry, that's the fade outside. I need to move this one, the fade in. It needs to be moved. So now these lights have a chance to get reset up in the air before the dimmer actually turns on. So it's good to have access to the forms, and the nice thing is when you edit the forms live, you see those changes. We'll go a little long, Kat. Let's go through these questions.
All right, cool. How does matrix in effects work?
I showed that. What do you mean?
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, groups, blocks, and wings are considered MA2 in effects. There's no correlation between MA2 and effects. It's just groups, blocks, and wings.
Cool. Copy that. Can you build an effect in preview and then play it live?
No, not in preview. You could build it. No, because preview is used to preview your executors. Blind edit, if I remember correctly, doesn't actually show running effects, right?
Right.
I think. On dimmer? Yeah. Unfortunately, you can't see them in the blind editor. However, of course, you could go into blind mode. Clear that out. You could take your programmer into blind. Sure. Select your fixtures. Say dimmer sign move circle. It's in the blind programmer, and then when you leave blind, it's going to snap that to the stage. There's just no way to see it. So you just have to have intuition. You've done all your practicing. You know what your effects look like. You know how to build them. Trust your knowledge, and then it will snap to the stage. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, let me see. Sorry, they're kind of piling up a little here. Hey Will, how do I off just some fixtures, not the entire effect?
You select the fixtures that you want to stop running the effect and say stomp. I showed that one. Right, these are all running in effect. If you want half of them not to be running in effect anymore, you select the ones that shouldn't be running in effect. MA, stomp, please. Same way you do it with dimmers. Remember, don't overthink effects. We've built them in the same exact workflow that you all already know. If you see a light running in effect and you want it to stop, you select it and you stomp it. If you don't want the fixture to run its color effect, then you select it and you stomp color.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, it looks like that's all the effect-related questions. You want something out of left field here?
Yep.
All right. And I lost the question. Sorry about that.
I know somebody asked about syncing multiple effects. If you're in the programmer, by the way, and you run two different effects, and when they start is exactly how they're synced, so it's when they start. So if this starts now and then you start this, these are technically probably out of sync a little bit, so if you store them both to the same queue, when that queue starts, they will obviously be synchronized. But if you want to see that live, you say MA effect, and if I look at the command line, you'll see how it runs the sync effects keyword. So what that does is it synchronizes all the current effects running in your programmer, so you could see exactly what happens when the queue is triggered. if you're starting effects at different times in different queues and you want to make sure they're synchronized, you can use this thing called AE. AE synchronizes all the effects. It resyncs the effects that are currently running along with the new ones introduced into that queue. It does potentially cause blips on the stage though, so be aware of that. There's no automatic transition. If you have a 0 time, the effect is going to go zing to sync itself. If you have a fade time of 3 and you use AE, it's probably going to look very nice and synchronize itself. Another question?
Yeah, I have a good one here. If I turn auto start and stop off on an executor and I just have intensities on that executor, how can I flash them with a time?
Use the temp button. So if you have an executor here, there's an off button, there's an on button, there's a go button, and about 1,000 other buttons to choose from. So use a temp. Temp is a flash button with timing. Remember, if you want help with any of these buttons, you click help, you click on the blue title bar, it tells you all about all the button options that are available. I think is it on this page?
No, it's in the pop-up. Select function pop-up.
Yeah, select function button pop-up. And it explains all these buttons. So, there's an explanation about temp. This turns the executor on as long as you have the button pressed, and it follows the time. Cool. Next question?
Oh, well, OSC protocol.
Yeah, there is no OSC protocol in the Grammar 2. It's on the wish list. As always, if you have wishes, send them to support@aclighting.com and your vote gets added to that wish. Or we make a new one. It's up to you. Or send your bugs to support@aclighting.com. Okay? And any questions you have as well. Anything else?
Oh, there's a lot more. We can go on and on there, Will.
I told you we're running a little long. We got 7 more minutes.
All right. All right, we're going to run 7 more minutes. Awesome. How do you break a current effect or chase from the center to the outside?
You use individual fade time. So, imagine you've seen this before at 100 delay. Nope. On dimmer, we want to do delay 0 through 5 through 0. And store that. So now that's from, outer to center. Remember, effects are exactly the same. This is why these are attribute-based effects. You know how to deal with values, which means you know how to deal with effects. So, if you have, I got to select some fixtures first. If you have some fixtures here, and add that, running an effect. You want to bring that in over a range. There is a time and delay on the effect layer. So I do the same thing. I'd say 5 through 0 through 5, which means the effect starts in the middle. And store that as my second cue. Clear the programmer, so we hit go. We see those all fade from the outer to center, and then when I hit go, you'll see the effect start in the middle, and then you'll see the effect work its way out. Now, remember what I said before about synchronizing effects. Effects start, their phasing is based on when they start up, so this effect is not going to look so synchronized. I don't know if AE helps you at this point. We're going to try it right now. Go. Yeah, I know these stay out of sync. So maybe this does what you want, maybe not. It depends on the effect that's running. There you go. Next question.
Cool. I got the hog breakdown. So we had a question come in that was wondering if there's an option in MA that is akin to hog's pile add effects function. And basically that pile add function allows you to run two effects on top of each other, i.e. a small circle running over a large tilt sweep. Is there something akin to that in MA?
We don't have that because it's the function of an attribute-based effects engine. So once I apply a form to this dimmer attribute, there's no way to add a second form because there can only be one. Now what's funny is when it comes to dimmer, technically you can do kind of HTTP executors, so you could have one executor running. If I do, yeah, sine wave 0 through 360, and you store that, you can actually have a chaser running on top of this, which then kind of looks like you're piling on. So it's up to you. It's because of the HTTP function. It does work with dimmer, so you'd have this effect running, and then you'd have a chaser that's chasing lights across, and this can work, but unfortunately not quite exactly what that pile-on function was. We did have that in Grand MA1, so it's not like MA is unaware of that feature, just something on the wish list still to try to solve. Okay, maybe one or two more questions?
I think you've gotten to all of these effect ones. There is a question that says, can some presets or preset types like color wheel or gobos ignore the program time? So I think that's a good time to explain the snap feature of those particular attributes.
Yeah, but the question is about program time.
Too.
Program time does not care about snap attributes, I don't think. Do you remember?
No, I'd have to check it out and try it myself.
I'm pretty sure if we have program time here, the gobos, gotta turn the lights on. So it's taking 8 seconds. Gosh, I'd even have to try. I'd have to try this on a real fixture. There's a snap. There's something called snap, but I can only check this by watching the DMX values. Orange. Oh, yeah. Okay. Even though set time is on, the dimmer is fading, which is following the program time. But the color, which is this value, 15, when I go to orange, it snaps. So it does look like it. In the fixture profile, you have to define the snap attributes. So color 1, which is the color wheel, is set to snap on. It means that anytime that value changes, it snaps, regardless of program time or queue timing. Same with gobo wheel. Now on a queue by queue basis, you can override the snap feature by putting in an individual fade time. So remember, fixture profile, and we have a whole fixture profile encyclopedia. If you go to the support section of our website, you can read all about those fixture profile settings that exist. All right. I think that's probably the end, unless there's one really desperate, pressing question that you think I should answer, Ken.
not seeing any. I think we covered it all.
Yeah. You guys shall email support@aclighting.com if there's any remaining questions that you'd like answered. Thank you for joining us today. I hope it was informative.
All right. Happy programming out there, MA users.
This is true. Happy programming.